So, as we continue to take stock of our country following the destruction and looting that took place in 2 provinces last week, we do so against a backdrop of a pandemic and years of poverty, high unemployment, economic malaise and corruption. Can we chart a course out of this crisis? Well, our future options have always been subject of much debate, the high road, the low road. Let's discuss this now with Vuma Ngcobo of the Indlulamithi SA Scenarios 2030 project. Now, he's written a really thought-provoking article in the Business Day today. Mass looting and violence, could we have seen this coming? Mr. Ngcobo, thank you so much for joining us. Loved your article. Did your scenarios foresee that something like this was brewing?
Thanks very much for having me, Sally. We have seen a lot of these things within South Africa, and we've seen it brewing quite over some time. If we think about the number of scenarios we've done over the years and a lot of the issues that they've been raising time to time, we can definitely say that we could have seen this coming. Thinking about the Indlulamithi scenarios, for example, we raised 3 key driving forces that would determine the future of South Africa, and each of them could unfold differently. Those 3 were social inequality, resistance, resentment, and reconciliation, as well as social state and leadership capacity, to be more specific. And in highlighting those 3 KDFs, we can definitely say we could have seen what we saw last week coming, and we can definitely say that it's been brewing for a while. Over time, we've seen a lot of flashpoints sort of popping up, like the incidents we saw with Brendan Horner in Senegal, and a few of the issues that we've seen with the looting taking place over some years. So I can definitely say that, this is something that's been on the cards for a very long time, and it's continuously, been ignored when addressing all of the issues that our country is facing. So
your key driving forces, as you say, social inequality, resentment, resistance, reconciliation, and then leadership. The fact that government is saying that this was a planned insurrection attempt, does that fit in with the resentment part of these driving forces, or did that aspect surprise even you?
Well, it didn't really surprise me too much, and I think it fits in more with the institutional and leadership capacity perspective, simply because, with the amount of corruption that we've seen over the years and the hollowing out of state institutions, it doesn't come as a surprise that people would easily, undermine the government and undermine the SA police service and so forth. The amount of corruption we've seen has actually reduced their level or their ability to be able to conduct their work effectively. So it didn't really come as much as a surprise to me. Where the resentment, resistance and reconciliation perspective, particularly the resentment and resistance, comes into play is more with what we're seeing take place, in Phoenix with the murders and the massacre that's supposedly taking place there. I think there's a lot of issues that we've put a plaster over within South Africa, as opposed to really getting down to the core of the problem and having the conversations that we need to have. And we haven't quite completed our reconciliation process as a country. And that's where that all fits in together. It's things that could have been solved quite a long time ago or openly spoken about, but have subsequently been ignored or treated as some sacred cows in some instances. And as a result of that, we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing today, and a lot of anger among South Africans, particularly the youth, where you've got a lot of unemployed youth with no opportunities, no jobs, no income. And they are high energy individuals who are more than anything frustrated about what's going on in the country. And you're seeing a lot of those issues come together and unfold to make up what we saw last week being somewhat a perfect storm. I think
sorry to jump in.
Insurrection and so forth was people more than anything leveraging off the problems that we already have, and using certain triggers, I guess, to sort of get those kicked off.
Okay, so in the Indlulamithi SA Scenarios 2030 project, this is a bit of background, which I want you to explain to us. You've got 3 scenarios: the Isbujwa, then the Naile Walk, and Gwara Gwara. Now, Gwara Gwara is a type of dance. That's all I know about those 3. Talk to me about those 3 scenarios, which I presume are sort of a high road, a medium road, and a low road. And what, because I know you do sort of yearly barometers, where we're going. Have we taken a big jump to the low road after this last week? How are we tracking in terms of the future scenarios according to the way you are mapping this out?
For sure. So I think the Isbutwa scenario is basically if we maintain the status quo and everything remains as is. What happens in that scenario, you see a lot of privatization taking place, and those who have and the have-nots basically do things for themselves to survive and so forth. The Nile walk, and if you've seen the dance, it's a nation that's in step with itself because it's a number of coordinated moves. So what we're saying in that scenario is that if we're able to get all South Africans to work together, particularly business, labor, civil society, and government, and take coordinated and planned steps towards a future that we can all envision, then we'll eventually see the nation sort of walking in step with itself. With the Gwara scenario, how we initially described it more than anything was as a floundering false dawn, where you can imagine waking up at 3 a.m. in the morning and seeing an orange light in the distance, thinking it's the sunrise, only to realize that it's trucks burning in the distance, where people do what they have to do to survive. It's each one, each all, and that's the type of scenario that it is. So it represents three very likely and possible futures that South Africa could see, and South Africa could land up in. What's different about the Indlulamithi scenarios compared to all the other scenario exercises that have been done before is that, most of the time the scenarios are created, they're presented, and they're handed over to whoever they're being handed over to at the time. What's different with Indlulamithi was that we developed a barometer, and this year we launched our third barometer on the 15th of July. And basically what it's indicating is that, when we started out, we were around 46% trending towards Gwara in 2019. And then in 2020, we moved on to 52% correction. And as of this year, again, when we reviewed all of the data along with our partners and so forth, what we realized is that we're actually trending more and more into the Gwara scenario, roughly at about 59% when looking at all of the factors that we look at to take that into account. More than anything, the COVID-19 pandemic has just accelerated the pace of deterioration as to how fast we're moving into the scenario. More of what's happening now, we could have at least expected to see it 2 to 3 years down the line if nothing was done with what we're seeing in South Africa. And because of the pandemic, that's sort of come earlier. We've seen increasing unemployment, we're seeing increasing unrest between civilians within the country.
Pointing to all the things that we need to address. And I'm so sorry to jump in because we've actually run out of time and you're completely fascinating. So I want to have you back very soon. We're heading further and further down Gwara, which is what we don't want. What we want is Naile walk. So that's the plan. We've got to figure that out. Thank you so much for chatting to us this evening. It really was fascinating. Vuma Ngcobo, he's a member of the steering committee of the Indlulamithi South Africa Scenarios 2030 project.